graduate student of mine, Brian Beck, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the bigger picture of the project that we're describing, and then turn it over about halfway through to Brian, who's going to describe some of the details of the methods and the results that we've got from the specific study that we did. So Victoria is right in saying that mercury is extremely widespread in the environment, and it's at very, very low levels almost everywhere in the world. And the reason for that is because when mercury gets released as a result of some combustion of coal or something, it stays in the atmosphere for a long time. And so even if some mercury is released way overseas, it stays in the atmosphere so long that eventually that mercury gets blown over the ocean even and can rain out or just fall out as a solid onto the land somewhere very far from where it was released. So you're right, even way up in Canada there's mercury. What we have here is a description of our project, and clearly we're in Minnesota here, but to put this in the larger context of the U.S., this is the number of fish consumption advisories by each state. And you can see that Minnesota has over 1,000 fish consumption advisories, and Colorado has 0. I guess there's no mercury in Colorado, I'm not sure why, but you can see that it's an issue everywhere. And this other image here is from a label that the state of California was lobbying to get put on any fish that was sold in the state. And so this is just an example of, you'd probably think twice if you were about to buy some tuna fish that had a warning label on it like this. So it is a big issue, and it's being talked about and regulated widely in the U.S. But what we're going to focus on today is sort of the transformation of inorganic mercury to methyl mercury, because the risk that these fish consumption advisories and this warning label illustrate is really due to a specific form of mercury called methyl mercury. It's not just any old mercury that presents risk to humans, it's a specific form called methyl mercury. So what is mercury and what is methyl mercury? First of all, elemental mercury is the form that probably most people are most familiar with. It's the liquid that sort of beads up, it's what's in thermometers. And it turns out that that form of mercury is not very prevalent in the environment. We have to concentrate that and sort of get that mercury into a form so we can use it in thermometers and stuff. It's not widely present in the environment. The most prevalent form of mercury in the environment is inorganic mercury. So it's a cation, it has a positive 2 charge. That's what's predominantly present in the environment. But methyl mercury is the specific form of mercury that accumulates in the tissue of organisms. And the way methyl mercury is formed is really an accidental byproduct of natural microbial activity. So there's microbes that live in the environment everywhere. And I'm going to say bacteria a lot in this presentation, but this isn't like the bacteria that make you sick or something that's in your body. This is just bacteria that are present everywhere in the environment. There's one specific strain of bacteria called sulfate-reducing bacteria, which, as a part of their metabolism, take the energy from sulfate and produce sulfide from it in order to gain energy to live. And these same bacteria, so this is my picture of a microorganism, these same bacteria that use sulfate to produce sulfide as part of their metabolism are the same ones that transform inorganic mercury, the one that's most prevalent in the environment, to this dangerous form, methyl mercury. And it's this methyl mercury that then accumulates in the tissue of organisms. Predominantly edible fish is where human exposure comes from. As Victoria mentioned, mercury accumulates up the food chain, and something changes as the mercury accumulates up the food chain. On the left side of this graph here is basically percent of the total amount of mercury that's present as methyl mercury. You can see that in the sediment or in the environment, in the water, somewhere else, there's almost none of it is methyl mercury. Right? Only less than 1% of the total mercury is present as this dangerous form. But as we go up the trophic chain here, we have water, plankton, and at the top fish. Now all of a sudden 99% of the mercury that's in fish is this dangerous form, methyl mercury. So it really is the methyl mercury that's controlling things, more or less independent of the total mercury concentration. It's the specific form that causes issue. So the third, one of the words in my title was sediment, and the reason why we care about sediment is sediment as it relates to mercury is for a few reasons here. The first reason is that mercury accumulates in the sediments. And so mercury, if it gets into the water, it doesn't want to be in the water as much as it wants to be on the solid phase. So if there's any particles that are in the water, sort of suspended in the water, the mercury will stick to those particles and settle out to the bottom. So any mercury that gets in the water immediately sticks to the particles and then settles out at the bottom. So accumulation of mercury in the sediments is one reason why we care about mercury. The second reason is because of sediment, and when I speak of sediment, I mean the wet muck at the bottom of a lake or a river, is because of the proximity of the sediment to edible fish tissue. So we might not care about mercury as much in someplace that's far away from the fish that we eat, but if the mercury is real close to the fish that we eat, then that's why it's a problem. And then the third thing, and probably the thing we'll spend the most time on today, is that there's conducive biogeochemistry that happens in the sediment. So these bacteria that transform inorganic mercury to methyl mercury, sulfate-reducing bacteria, live in the sediments at the bottom of a lake or a river, in anoxic environments or environments that have no oxygen.